Take two.
If you work for the Catholic Church and want to avoid burnout, overcome parish dysfunctions, and put more souls in the pews, we're here to help. I'm Ty Hua, here with my co-host John Kahns, and this is the Catholic Ministry Professionals Podcast, your favorite leadership development podcast for Catholic churches. Each week, you can expect engaging discussions, expert interviews, and actionable advice to help you move Jesus' mission forward in your parish. Today, we're going to fix hospitality ministries. John, what's going on?
I'm excited for this one. This is maybe a hot button topic, or for sure, maybe not a hot button topic, but it for sure is a key phrase that people go to in the church nowadays is, we need to have a strong hospitality ministry. And where it came from for me was talking to a couple of friends a while back, and they were lined up for their our parish's hospitality ministry, and they were running late because, like me, they've got young kids, and occasionally, like as you're walking out the door, your kid might look up at you, with their sweet, innocent 4-year-old eyes and just say, "Hey, Mom, Dad, I need to poop," and it can throw off your entire schedule.
Husbands too.
I know it happens every once in a while. So anyway, they were running late for it, and they kind of felt bad as they were coming up. And my initial thought, the first thing I thought was to just say, "Hey, don't worry about it," because in my heart of hearts, I don't know. I honestly believe if they didn't show up, no one would notice. Right? Just in general, a lot of hospitality ministry kind of boils down to the people who are greeting before Mass and the people that are handing out bulletins after Mass. Potentially it's tied in with the ushers as well, but that's kind of what it ends up being. And there's no sign in the front of our church, and the doors hold themselves open. So it really is, it's just not having more people to walk around on your way into church is what it is. And so I just wanted to console them, but at the same time, I was like, shouldn't it be more than this, right? Shouldn't that the friendly reception of guests and visitors, just that the desire to bring them into the fold, be a little bit more than just saying hi at the beginning of Mass, but that this hospitality shouldn't just be about welcoming them, but really caring for them. And so I want to dive into some of the nuts and bolts of this, and I want to cover it in 3 different areas that I think can beef up a hospitality ministry so that it's more than just opening doors and saying, "Hi, welcome to church," but that it becomes a ministry that feeds people, not just those who are coming into our church, but it will also feed the souls of those who are doing the ministry, because as they are giving grace away, as they are giving love away, we receive that love back, right? That's how grace builds upon grace, is that by giving it away, you receive it. So let's dive into that, and let's break it into 3 different areas. And we're going to look at volunteer training. We're going to look at kind of the intake and follow up, the way that we engage them on a deeper level, take them to the next step in their relationship with the parish, but then also looking at a really practical parishioner training, the people in the pews and how they are the hospitality, the true hospitality ministry of the parish is what happens in the pews of the church. How's that sound?
We'll see.
Well, call me out if I miss the mark here. So I volunteer training to me is key to so much of this. We need to have better volunteer training and just on a basic level to help our parishioners to understand the kerygma, which is a buzzword nowadays. I mean, it's coming out of the woodwork here, the need to proclaim the basic gospel mission of Christ. And you could make an argument for all the parishioners, like this is something we need to teach them. And I agree. But I think at a baseline level, this needs to become a part of our volunteer training. Like, it's not just training shouldn't just be anymore about what time you show up, what you need to do when you're there, and when you leave. No, it needs to be like a robust formation so that the people that we are putting forward as the first face of Christ that people encounter when they enter our church, that they really are prepared to encounter, to receive, and to proclaim the good news to those who approach them. And I do think that basic kerygma training, no matter what area of the parish you're training in, that if you give people the keys to share the kingdom with others, it will light their hearts on fire. So just a baseline level, all of our volunteer training could be beefed up by teaching them the basic kerygma. And here's the little trick I want to give you if you are in charge of your volunteer training. It's not enough just to teach them the steps, right? That's great. And there's different models for how to do that. There's the 4 basic steps of, that God created everything. He created you and me. He created us good. Second step is that sin ruins our lives. It breaks that plan, that design. So we need Jesus to save us from our sins. And then finally, we are called to respond to Jesus' saving act by participating in the life of the church through the sacraments, the life of God through the sacraments in the church. Those are the basic 4 principles, but then Jeff Cavins has other ones, and those are great ways to even train people, is to send those videos out. But here's the step, is in those trainings, once you've taught it, then you turn the cards, you say, okay, now we've taught you the pieces. Now you turn to the person next to you, you partner up, and I want you to preach the gospel to them. So it gives them that practical application of, oh, I did receive it, now I can share it, and it's that simple. So the kerygma training, essential, and it will beef up all of your volunteer trainings. I guarantee it. The next one is, if your parish has a vision and a mission statement, they need to be trained in that. And it should be robust. It can't just be the generic, like, we're a warm, welcoming community of disciples, yada, yada, yada. We welcome people, blah, 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 blah. No, what is the thing that the parish is working on? What is the thing that our staff has isolated, has identified that this is the goal? This is the next step for our parish. Like, as we follow Christ and his mission to make disciples, this is our next step. This is our next goal. They should know what that is. They should be able to repeat it. They should be able to regurgitate it anywhere. So when they encounter someone, they say, hey, I'm new to the parish. I don't really know what I'm doing. That this person that's in this welcoming position can say, oh, hey, that's great. We're really trying to engage people in the mission here, in the vision, in this way. And this is how I'd like to invite you to respond to that. Here's our Connect card. Please fill this out. You can give it back to me after Mass. You can put it in the bulletin. Like, what's that call to action? What's the thing that you need all of your volunteers to do in order to help you as a staff, as a parish, to fulfill the mission, the vision of Jesus Christ? They need to know that, and they need to know what the next step is that you want them to take in that stage. And then that leads us into the third part, which is, specific calls to action. And it's that mission, vision, like, what's the thing? But then there's probably key phrases that you would love for all of your volunteers to kind of say to people as they come into the parish. Just one specific example, and you can Google this. This will be fun for you. Like, hey, what are 10 things? Or use ChatGPT. Say, hey, I run a parish. What are 10 things that, like, our hospitality ministry should say to people as they walk in, so that they can understand who we are as a parish and we can call them into a relationship, and see what ChatGPT gives you. But one specific thing you can do that gives you a little ownership, that gives them a go-to phrase, so that it's not all awkward interactions. And this is from Turn the Ship Around by David Marquette. It's a great read, a lot of practical stuff for building culture. But he has this 3-name rule that he instituted on his submarine. And he said, I want you to say hi, call them by name. So you use their name, you use your name, and then you use the name of the ship. And the way that builds just a really comfortable, really well-identified, really solid identity within your community. So you might have to ask them, hi, I haven't seen you before. What's your name? And they might say, Joe. Okay, well, hi, Joe. My name's John. Welcome to All Saints Parish. We're happy to have you here. And just how warm and inviting that is, even more so than just like, hi, as you walk by. That can really build a little identity and show ownership and show joy and confidence that this is our home. This is our parish. Welcome. And we have a guy that understands some of this hospitality stuff really intuitively in our parish as well. He's a volunteer. And so it's done well in little ways, but to find ways to institutionalize it. This particular man, he's a regular usher. And he's also a regular person who hands out the bulletin after Mass. But what he does is, after the line dies down, people leaving the church, he will then come in to anybody who's still there and hand them a bulletin and engage them and just say, hey, here's this for you. And, he'll be kind and engage with them if they want. But, that's that extra step that we want to really instill in our volunteers, that it's not just about showing up at this time or standing up at this line in the Mass, so you're out there before people are skipping out, grabbing the bulletin, and then this is when you're done and you go. There's more to that. Like, this is a step in building a relationship.
I think there's got to be some intentionality behind it, right? We've mentioned it on several different aspects of church ministry, but what is the purpose of hospitality ministries. I think you need to take a look at that and ask your team that. Like, why do we have people saying hi in the front of church? And if you can't get a good answer for it, well, therein lies the issue that you need to start there. What is it that we're doing with hospitality ministries? And then be intentional, right? If it's just simply to say hi to everybody, okay, boring. Like you're losing souls by not doing this particular thing well. I think, you'll have the opportunity to disagree with me, but I just think that if you're going to do something, it's worth doing well. And hospitality ministry is literally the first barrier, so to speak, of a new parishioner or somebody seeking maybe answers. And they're coming to your parish to look for something, and based off of your interaction can either invoke a positive thing or they're going to go looking at a different church somewhere down the street.
Yeah, I think you hit a key word there, which is boring.
Yeah.
we work so hard. We have to work so hard to get volunteers for all of our ministries because we have made our ministries boring. We haven't tied them into the vision and the mission of the church. The reason you want your volunteers, when you train them, to understand like this is what we're working on as a parish staff, is so that they can then see and draw the connection, or you can draw the connection for them that this is what we're working on. This is how what you're doing right now directly impacts the mission of Jesus Christ. And they need to know that. They need to perceive that, because that will light their hearts on fire.
Yeah.
So,
and it'll drive them to keep doing better.
Yeah, absolutely. People love to do well at things. Mm-hmm. I hate showing up for something and feeling like I'm failing.
Yeah, or
that's
it's all
fun.
for naught.
What's that?
Or it's all for naught. Like I keep showing up to this thing, and I don't know if I'm having a positive impact or a negative impact. So, who cares if I do it well or not?
Yeah, absolutely. And on that end, then I think it's worth transitioning into the intake and the follow up. That understanding of like, what is the impact? How do we know that? And there's this next part of this hospitality ministry, and I think a big part of the call to action, what you're trying to get your volunteers to do in this hospitality ministry, is to help them to engage with the parish. So you need to have a process for helping them to do some intake and follow up. And so we talked about this initially on episode 80 about building a better bulletin. But what you want is an easy way for people to connect with the parish, to engage with the parish. And for that, I recommend creating some form of connect card. And there's no one universal way to do this, but there are a few things that it should entail. And that's to have, to really, for them to be able to tell you who they are, what their current relationship is with the parish, and then what they'd like to know about the parish, what they'd like to receive from the parish, what they'd like to tell the pastor, what they'd like to, whoever they need to tattle on that was mean to them in the hospitality ministry. If Ethel was being short with somebody on their way in, well then, maybe somebody wants to mention, hey, Ethel's being a little bit cantankerous at the front of the church there. People are coming in. Maybe we should do something about that because it makes me sad. They have easy options for doing that. And a contact card, a connect card, is an easy way to do that. So that becomes a part of your volunteer training. So it stacks upon what we're already saying. And it becomes a tool for them to actually engage with people. Because that cold start, and Ty, you can speak into this. If you're calling somebody for sales, if you're trying to engage with somebody, but you don't know like what to talk to them about, that's a really awkward conversation to start.
Yeah.
But on the others,
I cut my teeth on awkward conversations.
Is it easier if you know, hey, when I call this person, when I interact with this person, this is the thing I'm trying to get them to answer on, or this is the thing I need to hand them, or I need to tell them or invite them into?
Yeah, I mean, I literally wrote this down as you were talking earlier, but there's so many parallels of ministry and sales, it's ridiculous. So parallels of ministry and sales. And part of that is you got to get good at every facet of whatever it is you're trying to do, right? In the sales world, we call it the stages of the sale, right? It starts with the meet and greet, which we're talking about a hospitality segment of ministry. So if you're not good, imagine if you're not good at greeting somebody, do you think you're going to be able to close them? Chances are it's a no. Eventually, I mean, sometimes you can stumble on a sale, like you have the one car or one house or one high ticket item, whatever you're selling, that they absolutely have to have, regardless of the salesperson. But if you don't, can you steer them in the right direction with a good meet and greet, right? I have a warm experience with this salesperson. I have a warm experience with this this greeter. And it's like, what about them is so pleasant that I want to keep talking to them. I want to be a part of this ministry life or whatever spiritual life that they have right here in this parish. That has to bleed into that conversation. Like, I don't know what it is about Ethel, but she's just warm and inviting. And I have this sense of peace when I talk to her. What is it about her?
And that's the value of some of these, little tactics that you can use that make these conversations easier, like the 3-name rule. Because now that person that maybe didn't know anyone, maybe they've been going for 2 or 3 years and no one's ever gotten to know their name. Well, now somebody knows their name and they know the name of someone else, right? It's a bridge for the introverted, for those who don't know how to start that conversation. You take it another step forward and you're trying to anticipate people's needs. And instead of just having people greeting, you now have a station, right? You've got a station with a sign that says, "Hey, new here?" with a question mark. And they've got a place they can actually go and engage with someone, because we don't walk in and assume that the parishioner that's saying hi and waving knows the ins and outs in the parish. But that person at the new here station, they probably do. Or if it just says questions and there's a person there they can talk to, that's an invitation. And then they can hand out the contact card, or they say, "Hey, I really need to talk to Father about something. What's the best way to get in touch with him?" Fill out a connect card. Just write down there exactly what you need, and he'll follow up within 24 hours or 48 hours. We guarantee it. That's a way different interaction from I walk in, I look around, I don't see anything obvious, so I just go into Mass. That's it.
Yeah. One thing that just popped into my head, it's like when you have a really good usher versus an usher that just says hi, makes your church experience, your worship experience better, right? So take for instance this story. You walk in, the church is packed, and you're standing in the back looking around for a spot to sit, versus an usher that is looking for a spot for you. Like, how many people you need? Oh, you need 3? Okay, let me go look for it. And he walks up and down the aisles, and he's like, "Oh, right here, I found a pew for you." And then it's not so awkward, right? It's like you're directing where to find answers in that role as the hospitality greeter or whatever. It doesn't matter what the title is, but if you can help direct them and make it less painful for them to experience church life, experience community, experience Jesus through your parishioners, that's what we're here for.
And I get it, because that can be an awkward interaction to say, "Hey, we're going to shove more people in your pew." But the Christ-centered part of this is that usher on behalf of the church is bearing that cross of awkwardness, that cross of intimidation, that cross, they're bearing it for you so that you don't have to feel awkward about it. So you don't have to enter into somebody else's space and like take over their pew. Like the church is bearing that cross for you. And I think that's a beautiful vision of it that we need to share with our volunteers so that they feel deputized to step into that role for our church in a decisive way, in an authoritative way, as individual leaders in the pews. The third thing under this intake and follow-up, just to briefly say for follow-up, if you're going to have an intake process, you need to have an intentional follow-up process. It needs to be scheduled into your day. So every Catholic ministry professional should have a time block for 2 things. One of those is at least 30 minutes for callbacks, for emails with specific people that you know you need to touch base with, people that have reached out to you, to make sure you tackle that today, right? And then I would say every week to have a space like blocked out for in-person meetings, and whether that's over lunch or it's in the evenings or whatever it might be, so that you can create this hospitality of receiving people, meeting them, finding solutions, plugging them into the discipleship pathways of the parish that you have established. But you can do it in an intentional way. And when you have that block set, you're going to be more intentional about finding those people, which is the impulse to go out and to seek and to find the one lost sheep, right? That you have created that space, so now you need to fill that space with a soul. Amen?
Amen.
All right. And then finally, let's tackle a little bit of parishioner training. And these are just the nuts and bolts of this. And the context is really going to happen in the Mass. Like, you can put some of this stuff in the bulletin or send it out in emails, but I think as the pastor, to lead your flock, to tell them what the culture is supposed to be. And these are just a few things that build hospitality into the culture of a parish. And one of those is to tell your parishioners, hey, if you're showing up early, you should sit in the middle of the pew. Right? If you're showing up early, you should sit maybe towards the front. And what that does is that awkwardness we just talked about, the family that's in the back finding room for them and their 3 kids, 5 people, and they have to walk all the way to the front, and then they have to step over some Ethel who was there 30 minutes early, and she can't believe they're so late. You know, if they wanted to be in the middle of the pew, they should have shown up earlier. Right? So then they have to step over this person that won't get up and let them in. Right? This is, again, being willing to suffer the uncomfortability of not sitting on the outside of the pew that you want to sit on. Right? And the ushers, like you mentioned, I think that's so important to help facilitate some of that as well. You know, but there's other things too, right? There is no pew, right? To tell your parishioners, there is no pew that is your pew. Right? So if someone gets there before you and they're sitting where you normally sit, that's not your pew. Right? I have heard horror stories of like regular parishioners who show up on Christmas and Easter to find a creaster, someone who only shows up once or twice a year, sitting in their pew and just like chewing them out for being in their pew. Like, I'm a regular parishioner, you don't matter, blah, 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 blah. Well, yeah, what a generous welcome into the fold. Like, not, I'm so glad you're back. It's, you're in my spot, move. Mm-hmm. I can't, like, it's just, that's a terrible thing. We got to call that out. Other things. Smiling at parents who have unruly kids, right? And I have had like older patrons of the parish stare at us and give us like beady eyes because our kids are being a little bit unruly. And what's funny is sometimes afterwards they'll come up and be like, "Oh, I just love watching you with your kids. You're so good with it." It's like, well, would you tell your face? Because the whole time I thought you were mad at us, so smiling when you see families that are struggling, smiling because you're just happy to be at Mass, showing the joy of the Lord on your face, singing like you actually believe you're singing to God, right? Just teaching them, reminding them of these things. Like if you got to sing out, you got to smile, you got to show your joy on your face, being willing to hold a kid, like say tapping a family and saying, "Hey, I see you got your hands full. You got really young kids. We have 3 teenagers. If one of them will come over here, we'll watch one." And I'll be the first to say, like, my youngest daughter will make eyes at all the grannies that are behind us. And if she does it often enough, I'll hand her back to, like, the family behind us. And we might not know them very well. But, we'll just do that. And that builds community. That's a beautiful thing. That's a hospitality to receive the other. And they love it, But they don't want to interject themselves. But that's what the Christian does, is to say, "Hey, I am here. I am here for you. And if you need me, I'm willing to be of service." That's what the Christian does.
I will rear your child for you.
It takes a village, But I think with that, we can move on to the devil's advocate. Dun dun.
Every time, John, every time you give us something, it's more work. It just sounds like more work.
Yeah, I like to see people working hard. It is. It's more work, but it's fruitful work. It's work that is going to breathe life and momentum into your ministry. I recently started reading again Into the Breach by Bishop Olmsted of the Phoenix Diocese. And it's an exhortation to Catholic men to step up into the breach, right? To become warriors for the faith. And in that, he says that the church has always been a school that prepares us for spiritual battle, right? And this happens not just in the lofty areas of the clouds of theology and morality, but in the minutia of daily action. That's what the great saints teach us, that this sanctity doesn't just happen in theology and morality. It happens in daily action. It happens in our lives. It has to be lived out. And that happens in the pews. So we as a parish, we can't be afraid to actually lead, not just, again, in moral teaching, not just in breaking open theology, but in showing them how to live. So if you want to build culture, that happens in the actions that are taken in the context of your institution. So if you want a hospitable culture, you need to tell them over and over again what it means to invite people into this community, to be predisposed to receive the other. And that is how you will build culture.
You know, one of the things that just popped into my head was the early church. Early church did not win over souls because of this deep theology that they had. Because if you think about it, they did not have the theology that we have today, right? The development of doctrine did not unfold the minute Jesus ascended into heaven. But what won hearts and souls over to the Christian faith? It was the hospitality. It was the culture of life as opposed to the culture of death at that time, right? It was the citizens of Rome looking at these Christians, and before we were called Christians, it was the followers of the way. What were we doing? We were hospitable. We were adopting kids. We were because the Romans would literally dispose of kids that had deformities, or if they thought something was wrong with the kids, they just throw them away. Well, these Christians would find them, pick them up, bring them into their own homes, raise them as one of their own. What is this love that they talk about? What is this, lack of a better term, hospitably, why are they the way that they are? That's what won people over. And that's what should be communicated to our greeters, our ushers, and really every parishioner, because they are a greeter. They are part of the flock that is supposed to help win more and more souls over. So the mark of a really good tree is that it bears fruit. How often are we winning souls over? How often are we actually living out scripture and the great commandment of loving one another? That's what hospitality ministry should look and feel and smell like. That's the way that it should be. And I don't know if that's the way that it is now. Now I'm just on my soapbox. I'm surprised you didn't throw it up there.
We still can. You got time?
No, that's it.
Oh,
but that's what it should be, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
No, it's love, right? They will know that you are mine by your love, right? That's how we know. That's how we recognize the Christian. And we're so afraid, not even afraid, we're unwilling to be inconvenienced. I don't want to do more than just show up and wave and say hi. I feel like that's enough. Well, no. Actually, we need you to come and learn how to do that in a way that transforms lives. And so if you're not willing to take an extra hour out of your day to learn how to do this, an extra couple hours, like that's not love. Love dies for the other. That is Christian love. That's exactly what you're talking about, Ty. And it's something that we need to call each other to. We need to call our parishioners to that awesome book by Monsignor James Shea, From Christendom to Apostolic Mission. He breaks this open really well, where he says, if you are already belonging to the parish, like we need to be more exacting of those parishioners. Less exacting, we shouldn't expect someone who's not Catholic to be on board with our moral theology. But someone who's in the pews, yes, they should believe it, and they should live their life by it. And so, absolutely, for our parishioners that are volunteers, we need to be more exacting and say, this is the level that we want you to be at if you want to be the face of Christ in this community. Like, that's what it means to step up into leadership, and we have to call people to that.
Yeah, and
100%.
I think our souls are drawn to that. We're so used to not having that standard that once we refresh our parishes to a standard, people will be like, yeah, I miss this, right? I've got a really good buddy that moved from Marshall, Minnesota. And a couple months ago, Bishop DeGrood had asked for all the priests in the diocese to preach on Amendment G that's up for vote, which is, the abortion amendment, where they're trying to push a couple of things. It's too extreme. So November 5th, please vote no on Amendment G. But he had texted me because he knew that I was going to Sunday Mass and he'd gone Saturday. He said, you're going to hear a homily by the priests this weekend. And that's the reason why I moved to South Dakota. That's the reason why I moved from Minnesota, because it was being too relaxed and we weren't being held to a standard. So when I moved to Sioux Falls, the reason I moved to Sioux Falls was because the standard was higher. So shout out to Bishop DeGrood. We'd love to have you on the podcast. But we have to go back to that standard. We have to be able to talk about why we're Catholic and live out our Catholic life.
Amen. That'll preach. And so with that fire in our bellies and in our hearts for the change that is being proposed in this episode, we never want to leave you without some actionable steps that you can take today to move the ball forward on this conversation. And so what I want you to consider is sitting down, setting you may not be the person in charge of volunteers, right? But to schedule a meeting with the person who is, or to schedule a meeting with your volunteers if you're in charge of them to talk about exactly these three parts, especially in their context of what it is to be a volunteer. Teach them the kerygma. Start there. Teach them how to proclaim the gospel, and then move into those specific calls to actions that you want from them, that we're not just saying hi to people, but we're inviting them into a relationship. And I think if you do that, you will be amazed at where that conversation takes you if you call them to a higher level. And with that, I want to thank you for listening to the Catholic Ministry Professionals podcast. If you found this conversation helpful, please take a few seconds to text this episode to a priest or a friend in ministry that could benefit from it, and then give us a quick review. It really helps others to find the podcast so that if it was helpful for you, it can be helpful for them as well. On the Catholic Ministry Professionals podcast, we do believe it only takes one saint to start a blaze of the Holy Spirit. So if you're the saint the world needs for today, but you find that your ministry efforts are being frustrated, I want you to send an email to catholicminpros@gmail.com, because we would love to talk to you about how our trainings or our mission events can help you to transform your parish through your work.
And with that, we'll see you in the vineyard.